Hey, everybody, I'm Jarrod Alberich, the yard sale artist for the Longbox Crusade, and we got a fun one today. We've got a fun one. We're going to be talking about a little bit of a film review. I took to Twitter recently, and I asked, hey, somebody tell me a black and white movie, and the first person to mention one that I haven't seen, we're going to do a video about it. And so, this guy... This guy right here threw out a suggestion, and we'll get to that in just a second. But I want to introduce my friend from the Fire and Water Podcast Network, Mr. Rob Kelly. Thanks for being here, Rob.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jarrod. I'm very nervous. I don't do YouTube. I don't do video podcasts for a reason. So, I'm just if I sound a little less confident than I do on my normal shows, that's the reason, because I'm hiding behind the anonymity of no video.
Just close your eyes. They can't see you if you close your eyes.
All right, fair enough.
So I posed the question on Twitter, and Rob jumped in and said, hey, have you ever seen this film called Stalag 17?
Oh, nice poster.
I've
never seen that. That's a great poster.
I went and found a couple of different posters that I could put up during today's discussion, but the poster art is gorgeous. No kidding. And so, Rob, what led you to suggest Stalag 17? It came quick too, because you posted pretty fast after I did.
Yeah, well, I mean, you were specific about mentioning black and white. And so I was like, all right, that obviously scopes it down into how many films I could recommend. And Stalag 17 is one of the movies that, even though it was enormously famous at the time, it was a huge hit. It won Oscars. It's directed by Billy Wilder. Over time, I just don't think as many people know about it. And because I know you're a veteran, and I figured this was a film that has a component to that, obviously. So I thought that was interesting, and I just think it's a masterpiece. That's not a particularly controversial opinion. It's a beloved movie, but of course, as time goes on, less and less older films get noticed and remarked upon, because there's just so many more movies that come along. So I'm always going to be an advocate for this movie. I just think it's just great from beginning to end, and works at any age. And if you want later on, I can tell you the story about how I feel like that's my personal story of how I discovered this movie as a kid.
Oh, we will definitely get into that.
Cool.
First, I will reveal to you, Rob, I take a lot of pride in seeing a lot of films. And in fact, lots of times when Rob posts stuff on his Film and Water account on Twitter, I'm always like, oh, I've seen that. And I've seen it, Rob. Oh, I saw that, Rob. Have you seen this, Rob? This one, I'd never even heard of it. How messed up is that? I know, right?
I posted it figuring you'd seen it, but I was like, well, I'll try anyway. And then I was shocked to see that you'd never seen it. I was like, wow.
Hadn't heard of it. I was familiar with the Stalag system, and being that they were German prison camps during World War II. And I'd heard of Stalag 13, which is an infamous German prison camp. And it's all very depressing to me. So when I'm told, oh, there's a Stalag 17 movie, that's what he says. I said, okay, is it related to Stalag 13? So I Google, and it's like wartime comedy thriller, and I'm like, comedy in a Stalag? How did they pull that up? I need to know more. And so I did check it out. So now the audience has my complete background with this film. I just found out about it from Rob. I went and watched it. I'll give my thoughts on it momentarily, but let's get that story. Rob, what is your history with this film?
Many, when I was a teenager, I would have been 15, 16 or something. I was into movies a lot, but I was definitely, my tastes were very pragmatically defined as a 15-year-old boy. So it was all, Star Wars or the Blues Brother, kind of like, everyone knows what kind of movies
Highlander.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so one night I was just upstairs in my room doing nothing. And my dad said, PBS is running this movie called Stalag 17. You should watch it. And I was like, why? And he goes, because it's just a really good movie. And my dad is not like a movie guy. You know what I mean? Like, he's not like he enjoys movies as entertainment like anybody else, but he's not like a particular like film buff. So that was kind of strange. And I was like, all right. So anyway, I put it on, and it opens up and it's black and white. And I was like, oh, I don't want to watch some old black and white movie. Because again, to me, at that age, I'm like, Star Wars is it, Star Wars, Star Trek, and I didn't want to see some black and white movie, but he was like, just trust me, just stick with it. So I'm like, all right. So I stuck with it. And I'd say probably within the first 15 minutes, I was completely hooked into the story, the characters, William Holden. For every teenage boy, Sefton is like the perfect stand-in character because he is, he's got a bad attitude and he's rebelling against the own authority within his own barrack because nobody likes him there. He's a wheeler dealer. He's played by William Holden. He's unbearably cool. You wish you were as cool as Sefton is. And I was totally hooked. And I will say that from that point on, I was much more open to all kinds of movies after that because I was like, oh, if a movie from 1953 in black and white can hook me the way this did, then I have been missing out. And I think at that point, I became much more willing to watch any movie because who knows? I wasn't just like, oh, it's got to be science fiction or humor from the last 20 years. It was, oh no, anything could be good. And I really think that helped develop my tastes of being able to say, it's all open to me. And that I really, if I'm going to pin it to one moment, it was that watching Stalag 17 in my room and just watching the screen like, oh my God, what's going to, and you're like, figure it out, you're getting so it really was the beginning of like this journey I took to where I went from just a kid who liked movies to like an actual film fan.
Wow, that is great. This is such opened the door for you to such a broader, now that you mentioned that, it makes me think back, what did it for me? And the first thing I think of is my dad went to the library on Fort Rucker and he checked out two films that brought my, neither one were black and white, strangely enough, but one was Charade.
Okay, sure, yeah.
And I was like, wow, that was really good. I want to see more old films. And the other one was Kelly's Heroes.
Oh,
and those are the ones that made me go, wow, these older movies are excellent. And that's what did it for me.
I got to tell you, Kelly's Heroes was the original name of the Fire and Water Podcast Network, but the other guys didn't go along with it.
Oh, those bastards. I love it. Well, cool. That's an awesome backstory. And I want to thank you for recommending the film because a spoiler alert, everyone, I loved it. And other spoiler alert, if you've made it this far into the video and you want us, watch us, listen to us, however you're getting this, we're going to spoil the film.
Yes.
I'm certain we're going to talk about things that happen in the film. So if you've never seen Stalag 17, now's the time to pause and go watch it. And seriously, go watch it. And oh, by the way, they come and go on the YouTubes, but it was free on YouTube when I watched it.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's
somebody posted the entire film about 2 years ago and no one's ever taken it down.
For the longest time, it was not available to purchase on iTunes. And I was like, guys, Paramount, what are you doing? It's like, what are you doing? What are you waiting for?
This is an absolute jewel in your crown that you're not putting out there.
Yeah.
So it is available currently. Things change, but on YouTube, I watched it in its entirety and I truly enjoyed it. So I talked to Rob a little bit before we started recording, and we thought we might maybe play a little game of table tennis with questions, and I just lob some random ones at him, and he can lob ones back, and that's how we'll go about. That's my organizational structure for this one. So Rob, I will start off with this question to you, and you can hit one back to me, and we'll just play this game till we get tired. All right, you can't pick William Holden because it's too easy. Best performance in the film goes to.
Oh, boy. I mean, I know. Otto Preminger as the head Nazi he's pretty good. I mean, he actually supposedly complained to Billy Wilder after the film was out that like he was just typecast as a Nazi after that people. And from what we heard about Otto Preminger, he wasn't that far from that kind of like dictatorial behavior. I think all the performances across the board are superb. William Holden won the Oscar, deservedly so, for the performance. But I mean, Otto Preminger, it just oozes this kind of oily sincerity, and yet he's a Nazi, and there's that moment where they go through this whole sequence where his little toady helps him put his boots on, right? Just so he can call his high commander, so he can do the clock. And then he takes the boots off. Like the whole thing is just for that,
just in case the commander can hear the clicks over the phone.
Yeah, the clicks. I will say, I think my favorite actor in the movie is Richard Erdman as Hoffy, the barracks chief. Just because I like that he is trying so hard to hold everything together. And I will say, after I saw Stalag 17, I paid attention to where that guy appeared in later things. Richard Erdman, and I would see him. He shows up. He did a lot of TV work. He showed up in a Twilight Zone. He was on an episode of Cheers once, and then he actually had a late career playing Leonard on Community. He was on that show, and he would occasionally play this put upon older student that Joel McHale would always kind of like harass. He'd be like, "Come on, Leonard," and I've said this on other podcasts where I was like, if I'm not, I've never done acting. I have no connection to that. But I'm like, if I had ever been an actor, right, and I'd been in something with one of those legendary guys, I would just be sitting there talking to him all day about, you were in Stalag 17. What was that like? So every time Richard Erdman shows up in anything, I love him just because I just think he's so fun in this movie. He so wants to keep the rest of the soldiers from, as he says, tearing Sefton apart. But Sefton makes it so hard because he's such a jerk,
Absolutely. And coming at it from a military mindset, I just can't imagine. You're in charge of everyone who is in a terrible situation. Nobody really cares about rank anymore. Like they said, everybody was sergeants anyway.
Right.
And you're stuck between a disgruntled group of folks you're trying to lead and the Nazis. I mean, there's just no worse position, but he does surprisingly well with it.
Yeah, he does. All right. So my question to you would be, the one flaw I think this movie, I don't necessarily agree that it's a flaw, but I could understand people's point of view, is, do they go too far with the comedy? Is there too much of Harry and the animal being wacky? Because I will say, I showed this to my girlfriend a couple of months ago, and that was the only part where, once they got into like minute 15 of Harry and the animal being wacky, even she got a little like, where is it going? And I'm like, trust me, it's going to come back around, and it does. But I will say that is the one area I could see people maybe, it just goes a little too far. Did you feel like that?
I will say this: I noticed it, which is not great, but I saw the value in it. I had to wonder while I was watching this, like, how much influence this had on Hogan's Heroes.
And I think that's part of the reason this movie has a bit of for some people, a reputation problem, because they hear comedy in a Nazi barrack and you think Hogan's Heroes, and you're like, I don't want to see a movie of that. And you're like, it's not that. But
like one of the first guys you meet's name is Schultz.
Yeah.
But to answer your question directly, too much comedy, maybe a little. Maybe they could have dialed it back a hair. But when you have a tense thriller in one of the darkest situations you can be in during World War II, I think you need something.
Right.
And I will say that I think it rings true to military behavior. I've been deployed to Iraq, and overall it's not fun, but soldiers find ways to make it fun.
Okay.
And so it rings with a certain authenticity to it.
Okay.
But I get the point, and they maybe could have dialed it back a little. They maybe could have shaved a little bit here and there. I think the movie ran it like spot on 2 hours.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's like exactly 120 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, they might could have shaved it back to maybe like 150 or something like that. But I don't know what I would have taken from it. I mean, the standout moment to me for their comedic genius was the painting. They were pretending they were told to paint the road just to get to get to the Russian girls' barracks. And the beauty part of it is it's so simple, but the guy at the gate, the Nazi guard who's guarding the gate, is like, well, clearly they're on some kind of work detail, so he just lets them go right past. And that was pretty funny, I have to admit. And I read in the trivia that was based on a true event.
Oh my god! Oh wow! I didn't know that part. Oh, that's funny.
A couple of American soldiers in a prison camp did that actually to escape. they acted like they were told to paint this line. And so when they got to the front gate, they were like, hey, the commander said we got to paint the line all the way out to there. The guy was like, okay. And they ran. They just ran. I don't think they got away, but it was a valiant effort. But it was interesting. But anyway,
it does lend some credence to that theory I've heard where people say that like you can get into any building with like a clipboard and like a confident walk. Like you just look like you belong there. People will just not assume you're meant to be there. And so, yeah, the Nazis let them walk out of the gate because they look like they're doing something effective.
They're like, well, clearly they're doing something, right? And yeah. But yeah, that definitely, overall, I think it was fine. Was it noticeable? Yeah, it was noticeable, but not in that worst way. Okay, what do I want to ask you back now? How's about this is not such a simple question, but maybe kind of take me through your thought process on the film overall. When you start the film, it's sort of an escape thriller, and then comedy comes, and then it becomes almost a whodunit. So kind of take me through I'm fascinated by your story of how you first came to it as a teenager. Sort of take me through at what point are you absolutely hooked? Is it the whodunit that gets you? Is it the comedy? Like just what grabs you the most about this film?
That's a good question. I have to remember what part of it, but I think it was once we learn that Sefton. It's clear that Sefton is not the spy, and everyone thinks that he is. But part of it was just the evocation that Billy Wilder has of what life was like in this situation, that there's nothing, as you talk about, there's nothing to do. There is, I mean, aside from the stuff we just talked about with Harry and the Animal, there are some other really funny lines in this movie. I mean, this movie is very, very funny aside from the antics of those two. I love the ongoing gag about the guy that gets the Dear John letter, not the Dear John letter, but the letter from his wife who's like, someone left a baby on our doorstep and he happens to have my eyes and my nose. You'll never believe it. And he's like, I believe it.
I believe it.
I believe it. And then like 5 minutes later, they cut back to him and he's like, I believe it. He's so desperate to convince himself of what he knows is the truth. That's great. I don't, part of it really is just the performances. I mean, again, William Holden is great in it. And I mentioned Richard Erdman already. I'm going through the list of people, but like, Don Taylor as Lieutenant Dunbar and Peter Graves is in this movie. Neville Brand as Duke is fantastic because, of course, he just wants to just murder Sefton.
Oh God, he hates him.
He hates him. But and they do that thing where Sefton lights a match off of Duke's cheek, which is going to be incredibly painful. I don't know how you do that. But I think it. Especially as a teenager, the whole idea that you're being blamed for something you didn't do, like this feeling of injustice. Now, obviously, I didn't live that story or was never blamed for something I didn't do. But just the idea that you're rooting for Sefton because you know he's not the spy that everyone assumes he is, and it's only because he's a good deal maker and he's not shy about that. Like he talks about, he's willing to trade with the Nazis to get a little bit, and then he has that remarkable speech where he says, within the first week of me getting here, someone stole my Red Cross package, my left shoe, and I forget what the other thing that he mentioned. He's like, we're not in it. We're not all in this together. It's dog eat dog. And I mean, this is 1953 when this movie was made. So you're talking the war was 8 years old. The Korean War was, if not just over, still happening. And that seems a very kind of cynical take on and probably can counter what America thought about the war effort in that point, that we were all in it together and everybody was rowing in the same direction. But here you've got Sefton saying, no, I got to survive on my own because nobody cares about me. And I thought that was, I didn't know that films in the 1950s had that kind of sentiment. I expected that from a 1970s movie, like a post-Vietnam movie,
right?
But not in the 50s, that they were still hinting at that, not everybody's on board here. And I thought that was pretty remarkable. So I remember thinking, well, that's pretty cool that the 1953 they were putting that. And of course, this is based on a play. So I mean, that was even earlier. It was the early 50s that that was being put into the culture, which again I thought was pretty amazing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we could probably do this whole episode digging into the Sefton character, but it sounds like he's the true hook for you as a young man, and even for the first time watching it in my 40s, definitely very cool. My favorite nuance that they did with him in this film is that he is the coolest cucumber. I mean, he bet against his own guys escaping to make bank, basically.
Bets
And
the
so,
cigarettes.
yeah. And so, like, even as an audience member, you're like, oh, do I like this guy? I don't know. He's so skeezy, but he's got that realistic grounding to him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do I like him? Do I not like him? And then the way that they reveal to you that he actually, that deep down beneath the cool facade, that he does care a little bit about what people think, is when he steps out of his own character. He's such a shrewd negotiator. And what point in the movie does he just let all that go? He doesn't care about being a shrewd negotiator anymore. It's when he's trying to prove he's innocent. He's trying to pay off Schultz. He's like, I'll give you 400. So he'll give him everything in his trunk just to find out who the real guy is. So
because it's after they beat the crap out of him, and it's
and he's ready to basically clear his name. So he does have that tiniest bit of care and that redeemable quality. So what a layered character. Absolutely.
That scene with the cigarettes, I'm glad you mentioned, because it's one of the things that makes me like the movie, is that I think it rewards multiple viewings, because there's lots of little details that you miss. And I didn't notice this for the first maybe a couple of times I saw it, but when he bets the cigarettes right in the beginning, and he's like, he's betting that these guys are not going to get out of the camp alive, which again, pretty cold blooded. But then we see what happens to Manfredi and Johnson. They get killed by the Nazis. Then we go back to inside the barrack, and you can hear the dogs barking and the horns blaring. And we know, obviously, even though the guys inside don't know it, they can hear the bullets have been fired. So they know Manfredi and Johnson are dead. You see Sefton, and he looks mad. Like he's not happy that it's happened. And everyone else in the barrack has their back turned, so they don't see that. The only one that notices is his little assistant, Cookie. Cookie is looking at Sefton, and you see Sefton kind of being like, and so he's not happy that these guys are dead. He's just willing to, he is willing to profit off of it, which is a whole other thing. But I like that little moment that, of course, no one else in the barracks sees that reaction. Only Cookie does, which is why Cookie sort of is loyal to him throughout the movie, because he knows Sefton really isn't that bad a guy, but it's just the fates have conspired that no one else notices it, which again, as a teenager, you're like, oh, you just, Sefton's not a bad guy. Come on.
I know you owe me a question. I'm gonna hit you with a double though, and I hate to put you on the spot at the answers I don't know, but it was driving me nuts because I saw that dude Cookie, and I'm like, I've seen him in something else. Hey, can you point me in any right directions for that actor? Because I was like, he just looks so familiar. If you can't, then
I don't think so. He's done some things, and he still was around up until fairly recently. If you buy the Blu-ray of Stalag 17, he's on the commentary track.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, and so was Richard Erdman. So he's still around. I mean, he was at least until about 10 years ago. So he hung in there. But yeah, I'm not familiar with how much he's done beyond.
He's got a face that I was like, oh, I know this guy from somewhere. It's driving me nuts. I guess I'll have to use that whole internet thing to solve that.
Maybe so. I don't know how are we doing this then? I don't know what's going on. All right. So I have a question for you. Would be, as someone with experience in the military, in the film, once they realize that Lieutenant Dunbar is there and he's forced to be there because they want to investigate him because they think that he blew up a train, like they really act like that's a big thing to have an officer in with the enlisteds. Is that still the way it is now? Like there is this big sort of cultural and sort of divide between the enlisted and the officers. You guys are, they're one group who kind of looks askance at the other, kind of.
I don't know about askance, but there is and always has been a divide, and by design, clearly, because oftentimes an officer will have to give an order that is life or death to an enlisted man, and it's not given lightly. So yes, there's always that divide. There is a thing in the military called fraternization, which is not allowed. You are not allowed to be friends with enlisted as an officer. I was an officer. My brother, who podcasts with us on Longbox Crusade Network, was enlisted, so he'd be a great person to ask for his point of view. But there are still like officers clubs and enlisted clubs on every base. I've heard of a couple of bases that have made it just a club system, but there's still fairly well separated because of the fraternization thing. You just don't want to become close friends with people that you have to give orders to that
Sure
are less than stellar. So yeah, it's always been taken pretty seriously. I think the movie does a great job though at depicting how it works really. Because they're all like, they kind of make a joke. Oh, we got a lieutenant,
yeah.
you know. But then there kind of there's an immediate bond and a friendliness. Right. It's not a big thing,
right.
And that's been my experience in the military. That most of your sergeants and your NCOs have a level of professionalism to where they know not to push things, and there's always just kind of a friendliness without being close friends type of thing. And then, of course, when you're like me and you get out of the military, then you get double back and become good buddies with all those enlisted guys that you used to hang out with. And so, yeah, but I will say, bringing it right back to the movie, highly accurate. I think that's very accurate of how it would be, that they kind of joke about it, but it's, I mean, you're in a dang prison camp, right? Especially nobody. Right. And you notice the lieutenant was smart too. He was real smart, and that he didn't come in there and go, well, I'm the lieutenant, so I guess I got to be in charge of all this rabble. They had a guy who was
right. Yeah, he doesn't go and Bigfoot them all. Like he's like, okay, I'm kind of one of the guys and stuff. So I like that a lot.
I'm just here for a few days. I'm not gonna make waves. They've got a structure in place. That was a smart play.
Yeah,
a not so smart lieutenant would come in and be like, well, I'm in charge now, you know. And if he was going to be there for longer, they would need to probably address that. But he knew better.
Right.
But yeah, that's kudos to the movie for I think that was accurately portrayed.
And I will say the actor that plays Lieutenant Dunbar is Don Taylor, and he went on to have a film career, but he actually had a much greater career as a director. Oh, yeah. He moved on, and he ended up directing a lot of genre movies. He directed Omen 2. He directed Escape from the Planet of the Apes.
Oh, wow.
He directed
He's a sequels kind of guy.
Yeah, he directed The Island of Dr. Moreau with Burt Lancaster. Like he had a real,
wow.
He had a real, if you go through his credits, he was a big guy in the 70s. I mean, he was never like a auteur kind of guy. I think he was more like a jobber, you know, a guy you can get in. But nevertheless, like you don't see a lot of that of actors turned into directors with that longer career. But his career as an actor was fairly brief, and then director, he's quite successful. So.
All right. Well, we're almost a half an hour because this movie's so good. So I will come at you with one final question, and then at the end, I definitely want to get your final thoughts on the film. But my final question to you is, if you can remember, because you were a lad of 15, how good was your guessing at who the actual guy was? Who did you think it was? And because I'll be honest with you, I missed the mark. I don't want to live in a world where you can't trust Peter Graves, but
yeah, I don't remember, but I don't think that I guessed who it was. I mean, they reveal it after a certain point; they just tell you, and then it's up to Sefton to convince everybody else that it's security is the one. But yeah, I don't think I got it. I don't think I did. I tend not to when I've seen mysteries. I don't spend a lot of time trying to unwrap it before I see them. I just kind of let it play over me because I'm just like, all right, I want to be surprised, but. Yeah, I think by the fact that it's kind of funny that the movie's 1953, Peter Graves was not famous. So I think back then it might have been easier to guess. Actually, no, hold on. Let me reverse that. I think it's easier to guess now because we know Peter Graves. And you're kind of like,
have a bigger part.
He just stands out a little. You're like, really? Is Peter? Now, maybe you'd think, well, Peter Graves wasn't famous back then. Maybe he just had a tiny part. But when you see someone of a name value in a smaller part, you go, why are they in this movie? You know, like it seems like a small part, and unless this pays off later, which of course it does.
Good point. That's a great point about sort of looking back in hindsight. And now Peter Graves has become, that's one.
Yeah, everyone knows it. Yeah, it's Jim Phelps is there. You know, like what's going on? How can he not escape from this place? What's going on?
I feel like a moron because I watched it knowing full well how famous he was, and I was like, okay, it's usually the guy who barks the loudest. So I figured it was what's the guy's name? Got the match struck on his face.
Duke.
I was Duke. I was like, I was my ball and Duke the whole way. It's like usually the guy who barks the loudest is the guy trying to cover his own tracks.
Right.
And I was dead wrong. And I was like, Peter Graves, no. And I'm also an idiot because I was probably an hour into the movie before I was like, wait a minute, is that Peter Graves? And I'm pulling out my phone while I'm watching the IMDb. It is Peter Graves.
Peter Graves.
Excellent. Any further questions from you?
Okay. Well, the last question I have is when you did the poll on YouTube, why was it a black and white? What was it about black and white that was the the fulcrum necessarily. Are you not familiar with as many black and white films?
A little from column A, a little from column B. Yeah,
Okay.
It's an area that I wish I'd watched more of. I mean, I've watched a fair amount, and I've just kind of been getting into it. Like, I found a lot of black and whites that I've kind of been enjoying, and so yeah, I was like, you know what, I could use a little boost in that area.
Okay.
So just on a whim, I was like, pick a black and white film, and I got some great suggestions. And yours was one of the very first ones, the first or second one that came in. I think it was the first one. Someone suggested something I had seen already, and then yours came in. I was like, okay.
All right.
And I was tentative because I was like, is this going to be a depressing war camp movie? And kind of, but it's so much more. So much more.
Yeah, there's just so much to it. Yeah.
I knew I could trust you. You've never steered me wrong.
You can't go wrong with Billy Wilder either. I mean, the guy directed, I would say, arguably directed a classic in every genre. You know, he directed a great romantic comedy, directed a great social drama, directed a great war film. I mean, the guy you go through his IMDb and you're like, wow, that guy directed all of those movies. So, and they were all different. I mean, Double Indemnity, for Pete's sakes. You know, I mean, it's like,
which I need to see.
Oh, a great movie. 1, 2, 3 with James Cagney, a great movie. I mean, The Apartment with Jack Lemmon. I mean, Some Like It Hot. I mean, it's just unreal how talented this guy was and what a run he was on from like the late 40s into the early 70s. I mean, that's an extraordinary career to have, to be that successful repeatedly, both financially and critically. I mean, he won Oscars and things like that. He's just one of the greatest guys ever to do it.
Apparently, yeah, I definitely kind of got tuned into him thanks to this movie. I'm like, wow, he's got quite the catalog, just like you said.
Yeah.
And I want to point out too to our viewers or listeners, however you're getting this, that this movie Stalag 17 has the benefit, as some movies do, of being based on a play. A lot of times they'll tell you, hey, this movie is relatively cheap to make because you don't need to do a lot of location, move from here to there, right? It all takes place in this one area, which I think they filmed in California. And the benefit of watching on YouTube is you can kind of, you're never supposed to do this, but read some YouTube comments. And somebody made a great comment, though, that I would just want to bring to the show. And I'm paraphrasing, but they basically said, watch this film and realize that, comparing it to today's films, and realize there's no CGI, there's really no special effects of hardly any kind. There's no location changes. This is completely actor-driven, character-driven, and entertaining from top to bottom for a full 2 hours. And I'm like, that is damn impressive.
Yep. Yeah. It's just, it doesn't go wrong really from beginning to end. And that's amazing. And I said, to me, and it holds up, and it features lots of things that I think are still relevant. I mean, there's a character, not to get off this as we're wrapping up, but like, I mean, there's a character in the movie with PTSD, for Pete's sakes. Mm-hmm. You know, like they show that. I mean, it's all lots of things that you could relate to today that this movie's what, 70 years old at this point, and they were dropping all that in with all those different elements. It's an amazing film.
Oh, well, I'm probably going to make you repeat yourself then, because my last thing to you was like, elevator pitch. You got 20 seconds to recommend this film to somebody. How are you going to pitch it?
It's a great story, well told.
You don't need 20 seconds. That's absolutely right. Great story,
Done.
Well told, well acted, well filmed. Keeps your focus through the whole thing. You know, it's not one of those movies where you're like, I'm going to zone out and check Twitter. No.
Man. Oh, yeah. And if you get hooked into the story, you are hooked into the story. And then you are like, what's going to happen? That is the best. I have had some experience. You know, look, I'm all for having movies with like the best resolution in the world. And, I have Blu-rays and everything else. And I like to see movies with the biggest screen possible. But short of that, if the story is really compelling, it almost doesn't matter all the other things that get in the way of it. I've seen movies broken up in 4 chunks because the guy had to change the sprockets on the film, on the projector. I've sat in uncomfortable chairs. I've watched movies in very unaccommodating circumstances. But if the story hooks me in, it doesn't matter what else is going on. And that's, to me, is what this movie. And so anyone may watch this movie. They may get with their phone out, like, okay, we're looking up, but I think once you get hooked into the story, you'll put your phone down, and you're just wrapping up. So
great. I completely agree. Thank you so much, Rob, for spending half an hour here on the Longbox Crusade Network. We appreciate it.
Thank you much.
please, sir, pimp yourself. Where can people find you talking about movies and some such things?
I have way too many shows over on the Fire and Water Podcast Network, which you can find at fireandwaterpodcast.com. I do shows there about comic books, about MASH, another wartime related thing. I do a show about movies. I do a show about Bob Dylan. I do shows about lots of different things over there.
Awesome. So final recommendation from us. Found another cool poster.
Oh, man, those are great. I love that there's a woman on the poster. There's like no women in this movie. They're trying to make it seem like there's a woman.
They're all like from a distance. So they put a sexy woman on there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Go see Stalag 17. Thank you, Rob, for being here. Of course, I'm Jarrod Alberich from the Longbox Crusade Network, and we're going to act frozen. Act frozen, Rob.